Real men support real education. Varnashram without Gurukula is just a hobby. There's nothing wrong with a hobby, but it's not something you do for a living. It's not something maybe so impactful for society at large. So the traditional role of the man is as provider and protector. There is this famous verse from the 5th canto of the Bhagavatam. All of you have heard it many times. This is Rishabhadeva Maharaj, Krishna himself, who's speaking to his children. And he's telling them that one should not take a position of responsibility as a guru, as a father, even as a mother, if the person cannot facilitate the liberation of his or her dependents. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada says this: everyone should be very responsible and take charge of his dependents, just as a spiritual master takes charge of his disciple, or a father takes charge of his son. All these responsibilities cannot be discharged honestly unless one can save the dependent from repeated birth and death. So as men, we may have multiple dependents. Our wife may be dependent on us in many ways. Maybe our workers, our employees depends on us. Today, I want to especially focus on our children. Those are certainly perhaps the topmost category of dependence because they are totally dependent. So this system, which helps people advance in spiritual life, the social organization, as you know, is called Varnashram. Varnashram, there are 4 stages in life: brahmachari, grihastha, vanaprastha, sannyasi, a stage as a student, celibate student, a stage as a married man, householder, a stage as a retired man, and then a stage as a renounced man. There are also 4 basic occupations, 4 ways in which we are productive in society. There are priests and intellectuals, there are administrators and rulers, there are creators of wealth, traders, and then there are workers, assistants, people who support others through their arts and crafts and their skills. So this is Varnashram, and Srila Prabhupada said you have to establish Varnashram. He said it many ways, many times. He said this in the morning walk, February 76 in Mayapur. This is a morning walk with all his top leaders, the GBCs. So certainly, Srila Prabhupada wanted us as a movement to establish some form of Varnashram. Now, as in everything in life, we can see Varnashram through different lenses. We all have our mentalities, we all have our background, we have all our angle, especially because we are all influenced by different gunas. So we see Varnashrams in different ways, mainly through the 3 gunas. And so there is so much discussion, sometimes even conflict, sometimes tension on what is Varnashram, how should we implement it, how should we improve it, like that. Bhagavad Gita explains, according to the 3 different modes of material nature, there are 3 kinds of knowledge. So it is expected that people will emphasize different aspects of Varnashram, and it will have different flavors according to who is the promoter of Varnashram. So the fundamental question in front of us is that there are different Varnashram conceptions in Tamas, in Rajas, in Sattva, because our mind is influenced, our culture is influenced by these modes. But the fundamental question is, what can we agree on? What we can all agree on when talking about Varnashram? I believe that we can all agree that we should have strong, solid, healthy ashrams. We should have good brahmacharis, good grihasthas, good vanaprasthas, good sannyasis. I don't think any of us will disagree on that. And I believe also we can all agree that whatever psychophysical nature we have acquired, we all have to put our skills and nature in the service of Krishna. Some of us may be intellectuals, some may be more manual workers, some may be traders. Whatever we are in this world, whatever is our swabhava, acquired nature, we need to engage that in Krishna service. I believe we can all agree on these two things. Now, studying Srila Prabhupada's statements of Varnashram, we see that he had a much larger, broader, and much more ambitious plan for Varnashram. He wanted really this as a system to re-spiritualize society. For instance, in this morning walk in Vrindavan, he said, now you be trained up and revise the whole edition of the Western civilization, especially in America. Then a new chapter will come in. This is the program. Therefore, Varnashram school required. So you can see Srila Prabhupada did not just want we could say, internal Varnashram with very nice devotees doing their ashrams and their occupation, their services. He had a much broad and I would say even revolutionary idea. He says we should revise the whole edition of the Western civilization. And this is an important segue to our main topic, the Gurukula, because here he says, therefore, Varnashram school is required. In other words, if we want to do anything substantial in the realm of social organization, social reorientation within and without ISKCON, if we need to really protect our dependence from the very bad influences of this modern civilization, we need to focus on Varnashram school. Now, in every society, there are certain values, certain worldviews, and every society creates a certain education. So the society creates an education for schooling their children, and that education creates citizens to fit in that society. Fit in that society both as workers and as citizens. So you'll see that a certain schooling represents the value of the society, and whatever is emphasized in that society will be emphasized in that education. And in industrial society, people will be trained in skills that can be used in the industrialization, like for managers or computer programmers, operating or designing machines, and so on. In a society like Varnashram, of course, God consciousness and the building of character will be stressed as emphasized. So every civilization, every society has its own education. So what is the education of Varnashram? If we take Varnashram as an analogy of a tree, the education are its roots. And the educations, Srila Prabhupada says, gives in the first canto, he explains, in the system of Varnashram Dharma, which is the beginning of actual human life, small boys after 5 years of age are sent to become brahmachari at the guru's ashram. So when we talk about the society of Varnashram, the culture of Varnashram and its education, we are talking about Gurukula and Varnashram school. Same morning walk in Vrindavan. Srila Prabhupada gives this general direction for ISKCON children from 5 to 10 years, Gurukula. And after 10 years, they should go to the Varnasrama College. So this is in a summary. He said other things. Then he said the Varnasrama College should start when it's 12. Don't take it super literally, but as a general blueprint that Srila Prabhupada had for our society. 5 to 10 years, Gurukul, building character, building their attraction for Krishna, building their deep sense of identity as Krishna's servants. And after 10 years, Varnasrama College. Their inclinations, their nation, their natures, their psychophysical propensities will be identified, and they will be treated accordingly. It will be trained accordingly. Srila Prabhupada says in the 7th canto, formerly the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas and Vaishyas, everyone but the Shudras, were trained in the Gurukul. There have consequently been many instances in which great kings and emperors have given up household life. They could give up all their possessions because they were trained early as brahmacharis. Now, this is an important passage because differently than other systems of educations, or I would say most other systems of educations, the Gurukula is not just a preparation for adult life. It's not just a preparation to become ready to produce in the world for an occupation, but it's a preparation for adult life and for renunciation. Srila Prabhupada explains, great kings, emperors, they could renounce because they have been in Gurukul before. So that seed of the tree, the root of the tree of Varnasrama is in Gurukul. And we see that without the training of renunciation, cultivation of detachment from the very beginning, people even in their very old age are still attached to social activities, social responsibilities. We just had an election in North America, and you know the age of the two main candidates. One reason why they're so old that they're still struggle for office is because they're not being in Gurukul. They don't have the seed of renunciation in their heart. So although they are in their 70s, they still try to be socially active. They still try to control things. So this analogy, the root, if the roots are strong, the tree will be strong. Imagine, look at this tree. It would be very hard to knock it down. I mean, I'm sure this tree can sustain a lot of thunderstorms, maybe earthquakes, because the roots are so strong and deep and developed. So if our consciousness and our society has deep roots in education for our children, then our society, our version of Varnasrama, and our children will be strong for life. This is another analogy. The children will be relaxing or growing on the roots. The roots are Gurukul, then Varnasrama College, and then they will fit somewhere in the 4 Varnas and the 4 ashrams with a very, very strong build-up of character. Otherwise, if the roots are not very strong, spiritually and in terms of character, the tree can easily be knocked off. Our Varnashram and our deep spiritual values will be shaky, will be wobbly, if the roots are not strong. So, Gurukul is the root of Varnasrama. If we cut off traditional Krishna conscious, full immersion education, we will not have a real Varnasrama. Now, this is a broad introduction to the, now going to discuss the details. These are really details. You could do one way or you could do another. It's not really important. Or how many hours each lesson should last. Or what's the menu for the Gurukul children, or things like that. We're not going to discuss this. We are discussing the principle that the tree of Varnasrama, the tree of strong Krishna conscious society, has this root of Gurukul. Without Gurukul, it would be very weak. A few quotes, there are many more, just a few quotes from the founder Acharya that stress the importance of Gurukul to him. If you become headmaster of the Gurukul, that is more important than going to South America. This is the most important post in pushing on this movement. Letter to Mohananda. Letter to Stoka Krishna, 72. I consider the Gurukul school to be one of our most important aspects of this movement, and it should be given all serious consideration by the members. So Srila Prabhupada and those who have been around at the time of Srila Prabhupada know very well, Srila Prabhupada was not only talking about these things in the books, in letters, and conversation. He was practically doing it. You see this photo. There were brahmacharis in Gurukul. These brahmacharis are not photoshopped in. These are real people. Srila Prabhupada personally pushed his disciples, bring your children to Dallas, bring your children to Vrindavan. He personally gave the example as an Acharya of pushing Gurukul. Another letter to Dayananda Nandarani. Gurukul is our most important project. And these are not just letters, because one may say, well, these are letters, are personal instructions. Srila Prabhupada was trying to encourage the individual in the service, so we should go to the books. Okay, so let's go to the books. This is Srimad Bhagavatam, 7th canto. Srila Prabhupada says, in our Krishna consciousness movement, the Gurukul plays an extremely important part in our activities. Because right from childhood, the boys of the Gurukul are instructed about Krishna consciousness. Thus, they become steady within the course of their hearts. You can see Srila Prabhupada teaching Dwarakadish to write the Sanskrit alphabet. So you could see the founder Acharya sitting there with the children and giving example how he wants them to be educated. And ultimately, the most important thing in Krishna consciousness is Krishna consciousness. The most important thing is developing love of God. And here it says, thus they become steady within the cores of their hearts. We have seen, we have a number of examples in North America of children who have been in Gurukul, even with a mixed experience, but later, because they have this strong attachment to Krishna as a person, Krishna, the person Krishna, even if they went for different experiences at one point, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, they came back to Krishna and they became very, very steady. And some of the leaders are actually from Gurukul. Now, why it did not work? That's a big question, right? Because Srila Prabhupada did it, Srila Prabhupada spoke about it, ISKCON started, but frankly speaking, it was a major fiasco. By and large, there were a few successes here and there, but society-wise, it was quite a catastrophe. There was a lot of abuse, different types of abuse, sexual abuse, neglect, different strange idea of what frugality means. Sometimes the children were almost starved. Whatever. I mean, it was bad. It was bad in many ways. Again, not totally, but there was a lot of bad experiences. That's why, especially the American leaders, had to deal with this Turley case, and they had to come up with a number of millions of dollars just as a result of the court cases from Gurukul children. So it may sound even counterintuitive why we talk about Gurukul, but let's analyze what was the problem, why it did not work. Now, many of you are cooks. I saw in the participant, we have Apurva Prabhu, our dear spiritual uncle. Apurva Prabhu is a great famous cook. But even those who are not so expert and professional, they know when you cook, you got to follow a recipe. Otherwise, you may just burn the preparation, or something strange may happen. Instead of sugar, you put salt. So Srila Prabhupada not only spoke about Gurukul in principle, but he gave a very clear 2 points recipe. First of all, you have to engage the best people as teachers. We'll see a couple of quotes on that. Second, funding. These schools need to be funded. You will see Srila Prabhupada gave priority to financing these schools. So it's a very simple recipe, 2 ingredients, best people as teachers, staff, organizers, and funding. Enough money, enough Lakshmi for the place to be livable, for the children to have everything they need. It doesn't have to be something extravagant. Of course, it's Varnasrama education, but at least the funding for decent life for teachers and students. So let's see a couple of quotes on these things. Morning walk Vrindavan, same morning walk, a very rich morning walk. Teaching should be done the sannyasis, just like in missionary school, the fathers teach. Srila Prabhupada had this experience of learning in Calcutta at the Scottish Church College, and the fathers were like sannyasis, and so completely dedicated people, senior, learned, and they should teach. So Srila Prabhupada had this idea. Now, of course, there are many other very honorable and glorious services for sannyasis, but Srila Prabhupada did say this: teaching should be done by the sannyasis. The sannyasis are we could say, the best. Traditionally, they are the head of Varnashram. They are the gurus of all the Varnas and all the ashrams. So, sannyasis should teach. Not only sannyasis, but that caliber of people should be involved. In the letter to Satsvarup Maharaj, who was actually leading the Gurukula in Dallas, that school is very, very important business, and the best man must be found out for taking charge there and developing it nicely. Same concept. You find the best men, you find the best women. Unfortunately, in ISKCON, we have an history of doing exactly the opposite. People who could not collect money, people who could not distribute books because either they were spiritually weak or materially incapable, they were sent to Gurukul. It was like the shelter of the inepts. Not all teachers were like that, but often the Gurukul was really the refuge of those quote-unquote useless. They couldn't do anything else, they couldn't manage, they couldn't produce wealth. Okay, let them send to Gurukul. So it's the opposite of Srila Prabhupada's recipe. Let's see the other aspect, the funding. Letter to Jayatirtha. This is a GBC, so it's an official instruction for the society. All grihasthas who are interested in doing business should do so in full swing. Let all the grihasthas who wish to execute business execute business full-fledgedly in the USA, and in this way support Gurukula. The profit from the businesses should first go to support Gurukula, and balance may be given for the local temple's maintenance. So if you are a temple president, you may not like so much this quote because it gives priority to Gurukul and only the balance to the temple maintenance. But this is just to emphasize how seriously Srila Prabhupada wanted this project. Do business, make money, but support Gurukul. Letter to Jagadish, another important leader. The GBC should make an injunction that if they beget children, then whatever the expenses are for supporting Gurukul, they must pay for it. So Srila Prabhupada wanted to make it even on a basis of legislation. If you have children, you have to pay for Gurukul. That's what Srila Prabhupada's idea of ISKCON. Okay, so these are the two ingredients for the recipes: best people and good money. So one we may ask ourselves, if it's so clear from Srila Prabhupada books, letters, conversation, practical actions, that he was so attached to have Gurukul, he wanted the Gurukul, and ultimately the instructions are very clear, even in the Bhagavatam. If you search in the Bhagavatam, but there are both verses are in the 7th canto. Prahlad Maharaj saying, Komarat Acharit Pragyo Dharmam Bhagavatam Iha. Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse so many times. From the very tender age of childhood, one should do Bhagavata Dharma. The guru of Prahlad Maharaj, Narada Muni, also says, Brahmachari, Gurukule, Vasandanta, Gurur Hitam. The Brahmachari should live at the Gurukul, serving the Guru, developing that sense of humility, developing the spirit of servanthood, developing a deep relation with the Guru that will stay throughout their life. So if the Shastras are so clear, if Srila Prabhupada emphasizes so much, why we are not doing it? So I have 5 categories of answers. Let's see if you agree with this analysis. It could be analyzed in different ways. I see 5 main reasons. Number 1, our past haunts us. Because the first time around we failed, generally speaking, we failed as a movement in doing Gurukul, in doing ashram school, residential schools, and so on, then we don't fit to try again. I mean, for some of the senior leaders, and some of you are senior leaders, the word Gurukul is almost radioactive. As soon as you hear Gurukul, you may feel a knee-jerk reaction of rejection. I mean, some of you were involved in collecting $15 million just to pay off the tourniquets. So it is a trauma for many of us, many of you. So we need to go beyond this trauma. And one reason that we need to go beyond this trauma is we need to remember other things will not stop. ISKCON has a rich history of successes and also a rich history of failures. But we did not stop other things. For instance, we had so many gurus, unfortunately, especially in the 80s and the 90s, falling down. That created a lot of loss of faith, a lot of heartburn, a lot of disappointment, pain. But still people take initiation. People still become gurus. Enthusiastically people take initiation. So the problems of the past do not stop us now in that area. Marriages. We know we had hundreds and thousands of divorces, thousands, probably thousands all over the world. We had at least hundreds of divorces. But people still enthusiastically get married. Nobody stopped getting married. Nobody's saying, well, you know, so many divorces, let's not get married. No, people get married all the time. Temples, sometimes in some place we lost temples because legally they were not very well solidly established, and so we're stolen. We are right now, as we talk, in India, we have a court case in the Supreme Court of India, which is there since 15, 20 years, because a temple was stolen. Okay, but still people enthusiastically open temples, both in India and also in America. You recently opened a number of temples like Baltimore's and so on. It's just so many projects for building temples. But the Gurukula stopped. So we are using two different standards. Other things we continue, the Gurukula stopped. So why? One reason is what I call the new convert syndrome. What does it mean? Sociologically, most of us are what we call new converts. Means we were not born in Krishna consciousness. We did not grow up in a Krishna conscious family. So technically we are new converts. At one point in our adult life, maybe teenager life, maybe later, but we decided, no, Krishna consciousness is our path, is our way of life. And because we are new converts, we never been to Gurukula. So we may think that we are doing okay without Gurukula. We are doing okay. I hope most of you, all of you, are chanting your rounds, following, and doing some active service and feeling the joy of Krishna consciousness and kirtans and so on. So we're doing okay, and without Gurukula. So Gurukula is not so essential. We may think, I did not go to Gurukula, and I'm doing okay. Why do our children need it? In other words, I survived the material world, the material education. They should also survive it. Many of us, I can talk for myself, but I think I'm talking for many of you, we suffered tremendously in this material education, in this schooling system. So now we may think, well, let also our children suffer. No, suffering builds character. But that's not the system. So you build character by serving the Guru, not by suffering in a school. Now, third reason, there is no money in it. If you have a business-like mood, if you are, we could say, a Vaishya, there's nothing wrong with being a Vaishya, but if you are a Vaishya and you're not a very cultured Vaishya, you would not be attracted to Gurukula because there is no money in Gurukula. Nobody can get rich by doing Gurukula. It's just not a money-making thing. Because there is no money in Gurukula, there is no money for Gurukula. So this is a reason. I need to be frank. You know, this is a man talk, right? This is a men retreat. We need to be frank. We need to talk shop honestly. So obviously nobody will admit or say, but there is no money. And so there is not much attractiveness. You are familiar with this concept of 3G, 4G, 5G, right? Generally is used in communication, and there is very controversy and so on, if we should accept 5G or not. Now, we also have these different Gs in our temples. We have generally 3G temples. 3G temples are temples with guest house, Govinda restaurant, and gift shop. 3Gs. And these things are there also because they bring money. In some place they bring considerable money, and so we do it. In some temples we have 4G. The fourth G is Goshala, because we know that cow protection is important. And so we have the temple Goshala, or at least we sponsor Goshala. We have some connection with the Goshala, like the Washington, D.C. temple buys the milk from Gita Nagari, right? So 4G temple includes Goshala, but we need to come to 5G temple. We need to add Gurukula. When we have guest house, Govinda, gift shop, Goshala, and Gurukula, then we have 5G temples. But of the 5, Gurukul doesn't bring money. Number 4, Sattvaguna. Well, frankly, there may be a lack of goodness. Goodness is the mode of the Brahmana. Goodness means long-term steadiness, patience, being happy with simplicity. The life of the Gurukul is a life of simplicity. Some of you may have experienced. You spend time with the children. It takes a lot of patience because you got to discipline, but discipline them in a very loving, affectionate way. You can't just lose your temper. You can throw a tantrum when they're not listening to you. Simple pleasures. You have the Shastra, you study, you teach. Sattvic lifestyle. So it takes time. You have a child with, say, 5 or 7. It comes to Gurukul. You need to help him grow into a man. It takes 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Yesterday I was reading a quote from Srila Prabhupada. It was an essay he wrote, the Gita Nagari vision, and he was saying children should come no later than 7 and stay till they're 20. Of course, he said different things in different times, but just to give an idea, in this quote, he said there is 13 years. So you have a child, you have 13 years of working on the child. So it takes time, it takes Sattvaguna, and frankly speaking, many of us don't have that goodness. We want something more energetic, more dynamic, more passionate. We want to build or break down and do this and that and move around. You cannot do that in Gurukul. So that's one reason. Sometimes there is lack of Brahminical inclinations. 5, this is a general and very sad category. There is lack of faith. There's a lack of faith that Gurukula could work. We failed once, so we lost faith, or maybe it's not something we could do. There is lack of faith in the Bhagavatam, because the Bhagavatam very clearly say that's the system. Varnasrama as Gurukul, that's the system. We may not have so much faith in Srila Prabhupada's words. We may think, well, maybe it was hyper idealistic, whatever. Sometimes the parents don't have faith in their own children. They think that their children will not survive unless they get some certificate from some institution so that they go around to get jobs. We may not believe that our children can be Vaishyas, independent Kshatriyas, or independent Brahmanas. So sometimes we don't have lack of faith in Srila Prabhupada's idea of occupation. So Srila Prabhupada more than once said, agriculture is the noblest, most noble profession. But frankly, how many of us grew up thinking to become a farmer? Aspiring to become a farmer? Maybe some of you are, I don't know. But generally, if you ask parents, especially parents in our congregation, in our Indian congregation, ask, would you like your children to become farmers? They're probably shocked. So we lack the fundamental value and faith in alternative way of living. Obviously, to become a farmer, Gurukula and Varnasrama College can perfectly equip a child for life. So these are the 5 reasons I observed why we don't give importance to Gurukula. Remember, the 7 purposes. The first purpose is to systematically propagate spiritual knowledge, educate all peoples. But we fail even to educate our own children, frankly speaking. Most of our children, they go to outside schools. Isn't it a fact? Yes, we do maybe a little Sunday school, but that's not Gurukula. That's not Gurukula. That's not what Srila Prabhupada had intended for our children. Okay, so we need to look at the alternative. If we say we don't want to do Gurukula, we don't want to have full immersion Krishna schooling, what's the alternative? Well, Srila Prabhupada spoke also about that, and he was not very kind about the alternative. This is a Panda lecture in Delhi, okay? And it's a capital of India, it's a public speech, and Srila Prabhupada said to everybody, don't spoil your children. The modern educational system, without any knowledge of Bhagavan, I may tell you frankly, not only in India, everywhere, they are practically slaughterhouse. He spoke like this in public, he spoke like this in private. You have a room conversation in London 2 years later. I've seen intelligent boys, they go to school and he's spoiled. Yes, spoiled. He learns how to smoke, how to have sex, how to talk nonsense, how to use knife, how to fight, these things. Simply slaughterhouse. The so-called school is called slaughterhouse. Yes, slaughterhouse. Some of you may remember there was an article in BTG by His Holiness Badrinath Maharaj, at the time was not Maharaj. He published a list of major problems, according to the government, major problems in schools, say in the 50s and in the, I believe was the 90s. And in the 50s, you have schools like the children chew gum during the classroom, or they talk to each other during the lesson. When they have to walk, they don't stay exactly in a line. Those are were the problems in the 50s in America. In the 90s, the problems were kids bring guns in the school, they bring knives, there's bullying, there is pregnancies, there are all sorts of drugs, they're exposed, there are pushers, drug pushers in the schools, and so on. So you may remember that article was very graphic, how the school situation, especially public school situation, was really degrading. Now, this is, I'm not going to go too much into the detail. This disgust, I would say, this disappointment with modern schooling, it's not just from a devotional point of view. It's not because we are Hare Krishna and so we don't like this schooling. Even mundane, or we could say secular academics and intellectuals are against the modern system. You can search in YouTube a gentleman known as Sir Ken Anderson. Very smart, very humorous. I'm sure you will enjoy his videos. And he talks about all the faults of modern education. And he explains scientifically and historically how, here I highlight, education is modeled on the interests of industrialization and the image of it. He explains how mass schooling started with the Industrial Revolution to create people who could serve in the factories as managers and workers and so on. And so it's modeled on the interest of industrialization and in the image of it. Schools often look like factories. There are batches of students according to ear, which is completely unscientific. There is the bell. The lesson stops with a bell, like a factory, which is sometimes very artificial. And then there are studies that show how this school just destroy creativity. They make studies how creative are small children when they're 2 or 3 or 4, and when they're 18 or 19 after 15 years of schooling, they lost all creativity. You may want to especially see this video. If you have your phone, you can capture the photo, you can screen save. But anyway, it's 11-minute video, very entertaining, very informative. What I'm stressing here is not because we are Vaishnavas that we don't like the schooling. Even intelligent people know the schooling doesn't work. It's like a factory creating very strange ideas in these children. A big bang. No, we come from a big explosion, causal explosion. Not causal, casual explosion. We are monkeys. We lost our hair, we lost our tail, but we are basically monkeys, and that should be our value system, because we are monkeys. Evolutions, right? We were amoebas many thousands of generations ago, and now we are humans, but we are basically just machines for survival. Sex. Some of you know that sometimes sex education gets into very, very nasty details in the school. Drugs, exposure to drugs, and it's just a general militia culture in dressing, in eating, in talking, in a vulgar way. So these children are just absorbing all this nonsense. This is a cartoon from India. You see on the right, the bottom, there is this industrialist or this big fat cat. He said, good, there's so many students, they come in on the right, on the top. They go inside the educational system does its work, all the intelligence goes out, all the discipline goes out, all the creativity go out, and they come out with a little degree and a little funny hat, and they're done. They're ready to serve in the modern world. Do we want this for our children? Real men need to ask themselves these questions. Do you want this for your children? Now you give your answer. They are your children. I'm not going to argue too much. It's your children. But you need to ask yourself these questions. Srila Prabhupada was very heavy. Guru means heavy. He was heavy. He was very realistic. In this lecture in Melbourne, he says, there is no education actually. The modern education means simply a craftsmanship. It's just building some skills so that people can get a job. Srila Prabhupada sometimes say it's called Shilpa Vidya. Shilpa, it's a skill, it's a craft. You learn something so that people pay you for your skill. That's all. Morning walk. Mayapur. Krishna never says that you send your children to the university and make them fools and rascals. So one who is dependent on job is Shudra. That is not education. Unless he gets a job, his education is useless. Therefore, he is Shudra. And Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, they will create their own means of livelihood. If you're a really businessman, you don't need much education. You know how to make money. You buy cheap, you sell for more. If you are an administrator, an organizer, you can learn a few techniques, few skills, but you have it in your blood. You actually protect others. You actually give shelter to others. If you're a Brahmana, you can learn anything and you can teach anything. For instance, Srila Prabhupada saying in a lecture that all Brahmanas knew two things besides the spiritual knowledge and the rituals. They knew astrology, Jyotish, and the new Ayurveda. All Brahmanas. It's one of those lectures on the Queen Kunti's teaching. Because, as Srila Prabhupada explained, everybody is interested in health and everybody is interested in the future. So if you know some Jyotish and you know some Ayurveda, you'll be always welcome everywhere because everybody wants those things. There is a market for those things. Now, I want to open a little, very short parenthesis. I am not saying that our children, our devotees should not go to university, should not go to college. Sometimes their nature may be, say, to be an architect or biologist, they need the training, they need the degree. So, but what I'm stressing is primary education. Before they go to college or university, they have to have a very strong cultural exposure to Krishna consciousness. Srila Prabhupada was saying there should be very deep core in their heart. That affection, that love for Krishna should be built in the very, very tender age. Then when they're 14, 15, 16, 18, they go to college. Do you need a skill? You go and get a degree. That's not a problem. You need the skill, okay, go. Study history or study geology. That's not a problem. So we're not trying to give a fanatical Taliban type of thing. Whatever is in the Quran is already in the Quran. Whatever is not in the Quran is useless, so you don't need it. We're not trying to say this. But the root of society, the root of the character of a person is created in Gurukula, is created in the first few years. Later, they can go do anything. Morning walk. The modern education means to create dogs. The dog goes door to door and moves the tail. Please give me if you have anything. In Vedic culture, no Brahmana will accept any job. No Kshatriya will accept any job. No Vaishya will accept any. Only Shudras. Now, we are not interested in putting people in boxes. You're a Shudra, a Vaishya. We're not interested. But Srila Prabhupada is saying, he's talking about a mentality. A Shudra, why is compared to dog? Because it's depending on the master. I serve you, you take care of me. Higher Varnas, what to speak of Vaishnavas, they don't think like this. They have faith in Krishna. Once Srila Prabhupada was saying, the Varnas are determined by the levels of faith that different people have. A Brahmana's faith, he knows, I'm doing my duty, I'm ready to teach, Krishna will arrange something. I prepare myself, I'm exemplary. A Kshatriya knows, he's not thinking to be protected, he wants to protect others. A Kshatriya is not looking for safety, he wants to give safety. It's a completely different mentality. A Vaishya knows, I'll sell something and I'll find customers. Yeah. If this article doesn't sell, I'll change the article. I'll do something else. Vaishyas have that faith in God and in themselves and in the system of economy. They know they'll survive. Shudra, we need Shudras and everything. There are the legs of the body and so on, the social body. But the mentality is of dependence. And that's not very, it doesn't show great faith or self-reliance or self-sufficiency. That's why Srila Prabhupada spoke like this. So these are how many of students end up. You know, they have their degree and they go, okay, please give me a job. So we don't want our children to be like this. We want them to be like this. Walk into the Ganga, walk into the Yamuna, walk into the ocean, wherever they are, and spend time learning with Krishna Conscious Association at the lotus feet of Srila Prabhupada, imbibing the values, imbibing the philosophy, imbibing more than anything else, the love for Krishna. So this is the presentation. Thank you for staying. Now let me see if there are questions in the chat. I will stop sharing And
there are a few there. Can you see the chat box, Kaunteya?
I need to stop this thing. Give me a second. Sorry.
Otherwise, I can read some to you.
Stop share right here. And we have chat right here. Okay, we'll start from Prahlad Das Griffith. Hare Krishna Kaunteya Prabhu, you mentioned identifying a child's nature and then educating them accordingly. What is the best way to identify the nature? What is the level of accuracy in your experience? What if a child was identified as a Brahman at a young age, but then later on decides to work as a Vaishya? His education won't be connected to his career. That is what I've observed. Many kids who went to Gurukula ended up working jobs that were very different from their training. Okay, so there are 3-4 questions. I'll try to give short answers because I see that there are a number of questions. Now, Srila Prabhupada, in the same essay on Gita Nagari, he wrote that in 1956, so 10 years before founding ISKCON. He says that these children should be identified through Jyotish, through astrology. If you have good astrologers, they will see, because the charts can tell you what kind of psychology you have. Now, you may not have many astrologers, good astrologers. There are other standard methods, standard or more or less accepted. Now, you have heard probably about Enneagram, what kind of person the person is. 9 types of personalities, of character, which also gives, sheds a lot of light on what kind of nature they have and what kind of professions they could do. One system which is very much used in the corporate world is the Myers-Briggs, which has a long history, is connected to Jungian philosophy, Jungian psychology, divides people in 16 different groups: extroverts, introverts, intuitive, sensing, thinking, feeling, and so on, organized or spontaneous. And that's a very good tool to understand what kind of person the person is. Like, for instance, say a nurse taking care of people while they suffer in a hospital. Not everybody can do that. You need to have a certain mentality. You need to have a certain level of nature, say, compassion, empathy. So this thing can be used. There is another system, not so famous, but I know that those who practice it, they have a lot of trust in it. It's called human design. It's based on astrology, it's based on the chakras. You see the nature of people. Some people are leaders, some people are followers, some people have a lot of energy, so you can expect them to do a lot of different things. Others, they're not like that. So there are different tools that we can use. Gurukula is mostly for culture. Primary education, Srila Prabhupada would say 5 to 10, 5 to 12. It's not really a skill building time. You build character, you build love for Krishna, you build the understanding of the philosophy. Then, if you have character, if you control your senses, if you control your mind, more or less you can learn anything. You can learn anything. In this magazine like Forbes, almost every year they have a list of jobs that they do not require a college degree, but they pay more than $100,000 a year. And they have this list of jobs that don't require a college degree. For instance, one I remember was airport tower controller. They earn more than $100,000 per year in America, but they don't need a college degree. So, yes, but even in normal schooling, we learn so many things that we never use in life. So let's not have what you call an unbalanced idea, because it's not that Gurukula say, oh, we learn skills that we never use. Also in school, we learn a lot of things that we never use in school. I mean, think of mathematics. How many of you, of course, if you're an accountant or an engineer, maybe, but how many of us in life have used anything more than additions, subtractions, multiplications, and divisions, and percentages? How many of you routinely use square roots or trigonometry or different equations? So it's not just the Gurukula that, oh, they may learn something that they don't use. Main thing is character. If the child controls the mind, if the child controls the senses, they can learn anything. Srila Prabhupada gave us the example. You know that Srila Prabhupada, I realize this answer is a bit long, but it's important. You know, Srila Prabhupada studied arts, and then because he was inspired by Gandhi's movement of non-cooperation, he rejected his degree. And then his father arranged a job in the Bose laboratories as a manager. And you can find the Lilamrita. Srila Prabhupada thought, I never learned anything about management, but I can read a few books and I can learn. So that's the spirit. That's the spirit. If you control your mind, you control your senses, you can learn anything. We could go on, but I need to give some attention to others. My son is 13 years old and lives with cerebral palsy. He is not verbal and very delayed, at about 1 year old mentally. How can I educate him on Krishna? Or is he already Krishna conscious by being still so innocent? He still has the attitude and love of a new baby. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to hear that, your son has got this condition. Must be, I assume, a source of great anxiety and pain for the whole family. But yes, see, bhakti is beyond any material conditioning. So he may not speak yet, is delayed, but anytime he hears the holy name, anytime he sees Krishna, anytime he takes prasada, the effect is there. So his condition, he may, like you said, he may be a 1 year old developmentally, but 1 year old can make a lot of spiritual advancement. 1 year old can make a lot of spiritual advancement, can really develop a lot of affection for Krishna. So you expose him as much as possible to Krishna in a graphic way, in an artistic way, in not read to him. Obviously, don't read to him Harry Potter, but there is no bar in learning about Krishna and developing love for Krishna. Okay, so you're saying we sing and play kirtan every day. He loves music so much. So maybe he has some special karma that this part of this life, that's his experience, and is perfectly protected. After all, I mean, even the Kumaras chose to remain small children. So you can take some relief from that. Okay, Shanta Vigra Prabhu corrects me. Thank you very much. Is Sir Ken Robinson, not Anderson. It's a different son. I'm sorry. So it's Ken Robinson. So please go there. There is a YouTube link. I'm not sure which video, but maybe it's the same video I brought up. What are your thoughts? This is Prahlad Das Griffith. We have only 5-6 minutes left. Let's see how much we can cover. What are your thoughts on educating children so that they have many options when they grow up? They have high school diploma and multiple skills. I want to repeat this as a mantra. If your child grow up with sense control and your child grow up with mind control, he grows up as clean, then he or she can really learn anything. And that depends on the nature. No harm in getting, what you say, different degrees or different skills, but the foundational is the character. What are your thoughts on implementing recommendation by child psychologists or doctors for raising the children? For instance, letting the kids sleep, recommended number of hours, or systems of discipline. Now, there are different theories. It's not that the doctors or psychologists have all the same theories. So there is no such a thing as what the psychologist or doctor says. Sleeping is good. We are not saying that we should deprive our children of sleeping. Going to Mongol Arctic, say getting up at 3:30 doesn't mean the child has to be deprived of sleep. If he needs 8 hours, it just simply means that he goes to bed 8 hours early. So nobody is saying that they should not sleep enough. That's also personal. Like I know here in Gurukula, the children who stay there, they get up something like at 2 o'clock every morning, but they go bed very early. Here it's winter now in Mayapur, and you know, the sun is down by 5:30, 6 o'clock. They're in bed at 6 o'clock. They can sleep 8 hours. At 2 o'clock, they're up. Imagine how much advancement they do every day. So certainly enough sleep is required. What should we go for girl child, as Gurukula is mainly for boys? Also for new convert devotees with already kids of a certain age, what can be done? Okay, Srila Prabhupada, especially in the primary education, he had both girls and boys. So that's not a problem. He, of course, recommended dividing them when they reach puberty for obvious reasons. And when you have kids of a certain age, what can be done? You need to consider your options. You need to consider your environment. Some parents decide, say, to move to Mayapur to protect the children. I know once I was in Brazil years ago, and we had a family, Srila Prabhupada disciples, they had 10 children. And we spoke, and we would see that they were going to school every morning, to the local school. And somehow they took great determination. They sold their house, and they had never been to India before. They sold their house, and they just moved to Mayapur, and they put the children in Gurukula. Now, this is a model. Models are generally extreme, so we're not necessarily saying that you just sell everything and move to Mayapur. So that's an option. Depends how much you care for your children's education, the environment in which your children grows. What are your thoughts on homeschooling? Is that a better alternative if we don't live close to a Gurukul? Okay, see, living close to Gurukul, first of all, you can choose to live close to Gurukul, first option. Second, you can decide to work to have a Gurukul wherever you live. So those two options are also generally open. You move to where there is a Gurukul, or you create a Gurukul where you live. The third option, like you say, homeschooling. Homeschooling is certainly better than public schools. There is an important, in North America, there is an important initiative on homeschooling. It's centered in Chicago. I don't have immediately with me the reference. They have a website, and they are doing a lot of good work. We have some very good results from homeschooling, like Radhikaraman Prabhu, the professor, and his brother. It's I would say it's in between. It's not Gurukul and it's not public school, but certainly homeschool is good compared to the slaughterhouse. Certainly homeschooling is not a slaughterhouse. So I had to finish in 1 minute. They asked me to finish a couple of minutes before the hour. There are complex question, how to elaborate on generate funds for the Gurukul. Is there an example in ISKCON currently where a Gurukul is functioning similar to Srila Prabhupada indication? I'll give you an example. This will be my last comment. Here in Mayapur, they have been working for decades on this school. There was a phase of problems also in the 90s. At the same time, now they stabilized, and many parents from different parts of the world, many parts of India, they come here, and they have a lot of developed program, very, very, very close, if not aligned with what Srila Prabhupada wanted. So my time is up. Thank you very much for your attention and interest. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you, Kaunteya Prabhu. And I think you're actually speaking to us from Mayapur, isn't that right?
Yes, I am.
So I think if you look out your window, you see one of the authentic traditional Gurukula functions just a few hundred meters from your ashram.
I do.
So I think you're inspired by that. So thank you for being with us. Really, really.
And actually, I served 6 years in Gurukula as a teacher, by the way, also.
Ah, okay.
So I'm also talking from experience, not just here.
That experience with you. Thank you. I particularly appreciated a few things you said in particular. I jotted down. You talked about that the essence, as I heard you speak, was we're looking to imbibe the values, the philosophy, and love for Krishna in the children, and that sometimes we put structure before content or structure before culture. And I think that's some of the things that you really kind of highlighted that I appreciated, the 5 points you talked about why we're not doing this so well today. And I think it's a message to all of us to be. I was reading some teachings about Bhaktivinoda Thakur today early, and they were talking about how he was so instrumental in understanding how to take the authenticity of the tradition and apply it in the modern situation. What was his modern situation? So I think you're raising some challenges for us. How do we take the essence and not discard things that didn't work in the past, and yet at the same time don't recreate the same mistakes, but learn from the mistakes, learn from the model, then apply it in a very thoughtful way. And as you said, making sure first and foremost we're imbibing the values, philosophy, and love in the children. So thank you. I very much appreciate it.